In the beginning, there was nothing. Then a couple things. Then God rested, and when he woke up, there was a League of Legends.
Free-to-play competitive games have largely overtaken the gaming market. Ever since games like Fortnite took the big stage and people were winning $1 million prize pools, normal people have had a lot of questions. Professional gaming? $1 million? Why doesn't my kid do that? Whenever there's a mass onboarding of players into these spaces, there's little to prepare them for what's to come. For a plethora of free-to-play game spaces, this is synonymous with harassment and degradation. From bad manners within the space to callous business practices and little competitive alternatives, the nature of these titles almost begs for toxicity. But how exactly do competitive free-to-play games exploit the status quo? Largely, I'm going to be using the most popular and current darling of the free-to-play game space, Marvel Rivals, as an example. Firstly, because its honeymoon phase is almost over for that game, meaning people are actually ready to give their honest opinion on its flaws, and statistically, I'm higher ranked than you in it. Let's start with the obvious. How do free-to-play games work? Typically, free-to-play competitive games are combative team games where players attempt to complete an arbitrary objective in about 20 to 40 minutes. They often have a large cast of vibrant characters, guns, technology, and/or magic, and update every couple of months to keep players playing. Because these games are free-to-play, they often sell cosmetic items. These are items purely for vanity, often referred to as skins, to make their dollar and keep things fair. This might not seem like a sound business practice till statistics like 85% of games revenue comes from free-to-play games, which is a $117 billion industry. For reference, American football is only $20 billion, and then people wonder why they didn't make it so you could kill people as Ariana Grande sooner. More often than not, these games will consist of a ranked mode, which is where the competitive title comes from. This will have players going online to ascend what is deemed the ranked ladder, which will place them in ranks according to skill level, making you go up or down based off of a win or loss. To encourage engagement with the competitive side of these games, many leagues, tournaments, and teams have been created to show off what the best of the best can do with the promise of prestige, large prize pools, and of course sponsors. This embeds these games with an often sports-like mentality, as in, shit gets serious. However, the major difference between this and something like soccer for the average player is that you can find a handful of people to play with a push of a button at any time, and team-wide instant communication is both encouraged and powerful.
I heal you for there's a cloak. Strange low.
Strange dead.
Cloak on point. Nice.
Imagine a quarterback had the ability to tell his players some 50 yards downfield exactly what he wanted them to do, or vice versa, without the other team hearing. Being able to communicate plays at a moment's notice means team play becomes that much more powerful. However, obviously because this is anonymous, every 14-year-old white boy who still listens to Kanye can say whatever he wants. For example, if Rodney Racial Slur wants to say some things that would lose him his job in the future, it's likely that he first receives a warning, and then maybe if he slips up again, a couple days suspension from talking or typing. But that's even if it gets picked up at all. If it goes on from there, he might get a lengthier sentence, or maybe a ban from the game, but after this many indictments, there needs to be a reminder that this game is free. Like, free. If he really missed that time harassing people or just playing in general, he could just make another account. I have personally ran into a plethora of genuine creatures playing games.
It's okay.
What the actual fuck? What the fuck is that? And what I love from a game is getting any type of notification that says they had a punishment enacted on them. On my way to Grandmaster, do you know how many reports actually came back to me that something was done? A whopping 1. But it makes the punishment laughable, really. The failure to actually police harassment makes these spaces synonymous with them, and leads to a lot of players either not using voice chat, or better yet, not playing the game. If you refuse to use voice chat, you diminish the positive social aspects of the game, and your ability to win. And obviously no one should be harassed out of playing a game. This is despite many games' promises of retaining a healthy game space, but when these promises eventually lead to failure, it's more immediately confusing the characters they put in these games. Despite their many failures, these games will often have a plethora of representations across the board. While it's immediately obvious upon a character's actual traits, it's also important how a character's other aspects are coded and the demographic it may entice. but the representation is clearly not in stark defense of the marginalized, because these games also often represent that which would oppose representation. Yes, we do have characters like Storm and Black Panther, but it's by no mistake that the character most directly tied to white nationalism and actual Nazism in America is also in the game. Yes, we do have a large cast of femme characters, but show me one who isn't hypersexualized, especially through cosmetics. Yes, we do have queer characters, but all of them have zero visibility, and all of them are bi or pan. There are purposefully ways in which these games don't engage with representation, and it stings of hyper-capitalist tactics like rainbow capitalism. For those uninclined, rainbow capitalism is a propensity for brands with little or no community, allyship, or often respect for the queer community to market items specifically to the queer community in hopes of raking in cash. This also applies in a subtler way to many of the identities in these games. But they fail to hold up even basic protections that their players need in hopes of still representing them enough to pull an audience. Because free-to-play games revenue is so tightly linked with player numbers, they have to appeal to everyone. By playing both sides, they rake in the most cash and protect themselves from backlash. This is slightly different in pay-to-play games, as they often have the opportunity to stick to a certain viewpoint or stance, from actively funding the military-industrial complex to inventing a genre of lesbian. Of course, this doesn't ensure sanctity within paid products that represent you, but companies within the free-to-play game space have to enthrall everyone by nature of how they work monetarily. The objective is to get as many people hooked on it as possible, because competition within the space means large drop-offs between being even first and second. They cannot afford to not advertise themselves to the widest demographic. While free-to-play games largely represent the most profitable area of gaming right now, I know a couple of you are wondering, why don't you just pay for that shit? So please, consider the following. The actual competitive play of these games are specifically designed to keep players playing, but there are limited accessible alternatives. Developers aren't creating good or sportsman-like ranked systems, it's to turn a profit. In recent years, this has led to a plethora of criticisms coming under how many online ranked systems operate. Many players have noticed an increase in how much time a game demands of you to rank up, and decisions made to ignore toxicity and rage within the player base. From a marketing perspective, this is perfect. Engaging in rage when most of your player base is teenage boys keeps them playing, and it's one of the many places where rage is expected and honestly encouraged in young men. But I came here to play the game, not babysit your ass to the objective. It's important to note that casual spaces in free-to-play games are minimized because getting players to engage with ranked systems keeps them hooked. This is important because casual play is lower stakes, and it's what most of the player base will be engaging with, but ranked play gets them to stay. The ranked mentality is so all-encompassing, there often isn't much of a difference between casual and ranked play. Online, there's a sentiment that I think is kind of dumb, that as you get into higher ranks, the homophobes become more and more scarce. But not only is there not a single actual study about this, just a bunch of conflicting anecdotes, but either way, the solution to a game being toxic shouldn't be to get better. And I hate that this often diffuses the discussion online. Gaming as a hobby is getting more expensive. Even with Nintendo's euphoric hype around its new systems and games, a much larger topic on their pricing is happening. For the first time in years, developers are increasing pricing of single games and have steadily increased pricing over the consoles. This has caused a caustic reaction online.
I'm sorry, $80 for Mario Kart? And the Switch is 500 beans? Bowser better be giving me top expeditiously. Every time I turn on that console, I bet it crazy work.
Honestly, same. While this very loud backlash against pricing may not reflect in sales, I think the American market, with possible tariffs and economic recession on the way, may be uniquely absent. Even with a much more reasonable price tag, the original Switch isn't immune to criticism. Additionally, this habit of game prices going through the roof and intensive advertisement of pre-order sales doesn't correlate to a game being fun or even functional on launch.
This city is trash.
So the appeal of free-to-play games is simple, right? If you try the game and it's terrible, you just don't pay. However, this locks the small amount of security found in paid games behind prices that seem like they're only going to get bigger. So in all, free-to-play games represent the widest demographic, aimed to keep players because of their unique position within the market, and even if you did pay for your products, often have a limited scope of benefits. So for the average consumer, it isn't really much of a solution. Every so often, there's more news about companies within the gaming space having to reveal more layoffs, mass HR violations, or accounts of terrible office culture. What's worse is that there's no motion behind any of these terrible actions. meaning players don't stop playing and they don't reduce how much they play. Riot can have a walkout about sexist culture, fire those employees, then reveal news about their upcoming project to drown the news out, and nothing will happen. And of course, a plethora of problems around representation we've discussed would at least be handled marginally better if there were people of color or women within powerful positions in these companies. This isn't to villainize you, the player, for playing these games. And even if you don't play these games, you're using a platform all too similar to it right now. Free-to-play games are a cheap alternative to media consumption within the space, akin to social media. It's not good for you, it's not good for the people who work on it, and it's definitely not ethical, but people use it anyways. Unlike social media, you have the opportunity to prevent capital at source by simply not getting that $5 skin. It would be better for you to not play them at all, but that's not a realistic approach for a plethora of poor Americans because the alternatives are largely the same. While these systemic issues found within our media can seem daunting, there are ways for you to source from good spaces. You may not be able to buy locally, but you can buy indie. I genuinely believe indie or independent games are the future of affordable, good games. Being sourced from development teams you can actually trust means these games can be produced ethically and represent minorities without having to water them down or present them for a profit. Even better, these games often come at a cheaper price, when you really don't have a reason to buy that $5 skin, when you could be bumping to Nubby's Number Factory instead. Even if you haven't played games in a while, I can assure you that there are worlds to get lost in. From great novels like Disco Elysium to breakneck action movies like Ultra Kill, I promise you there's a game out there that you'll like. And unlike larger companies, there isn't somebody analyzing brain chemistry to keep you engaged or using manipulative marketing tactics. If a game is good, reviews will reflect that. This isn't to demonize players who play free-to-play games, because I will continue to play them. And even if you don't, you're on YouTube right now. A lot of the ridicule I brought up here can be applied to a plethora of forms of entertainment. The nature of media in the modern age is to portray itself outside of politics, while often directly or indirectly hurting minorities. While we should strive to source media ethically, not a lot of people have the money to do that. That doesn't mean that these forms of media should go without criticism, or that people who use them are void of criticism either. But what's irresponsible is not knowing or applying yourself when media attempts to shield itself from its own failures. So what can you do about media that protects the status quo? Educate yourself politically and get out there. While it's unlikely you will be able to protest media of your choosing directly, political action to support workers helps everyone. By protesting in person, you can form movements that actually push boundaries of what workers are worth. Working to support minorities will also deter from performative representation in the forms that actually care for us. Educate yourself on how media works, and look for possible alternatives you can strive for. Even if you stick with free-to-play games, playing with friends, whether in person or online, can help foster community. Resist the urge to buy skins and spend that money on alternative forms of indie media. There are more options than you think. So what are you waiting for? Silksong?
For the hit, Matt Walsh with a laser. I ain't fucking with you, boy, you a chaser.